Matt Perry, the Friends star, was found unresponsive, you'll remember, in his Pacific Palisades pool all the way back in October. Now the medical examiner says Perry's cause of death was, in fact, of the acute effects of ketamine, and today law enforcement officials are telling KCAL News there is an open investigation into exactly what happened. According to the LA Times, the two agencies are looking at where Perry got the ketamine from. Of course, it's a developing story. Any new information on this, we'll get it out to you as soon as possible right here on kcalnews.com. Breaking right now, a stabbing attack on a Metro bus in Linwood. Our Jasmine Veal on scene now with the very latest.
I'm here in Linwood, right at the intersection of Long Beach Boulevard and Norton Avenue. And behind me, you see the Metro bus driver, and that is the bus that he was driving just after 11 this morning when he says he heard a commotion in the back of the bus. He heard the bell ring, the bell that demands the bus to stop, and then one man stabbed another man. LA County Sheriff deputies are here. They are questioning that suspect. He was actually detained pretty quickly after the stabbing. The victim was transported, another man, to a hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, but again, a stabbing, yet another incidents of violence here within the Metro system. And again, this time a man stabbed on a Metro bus. So, of course, just talking to one lady, her mom, very shaken. She was also in the back of the bus when the stabbing happened. This comes just days after we saw a deadly shooting on a Metro bus in Commerce last Thursday. A man was shot, another passenger shot to death on a Metro bus in Commerce. Also, last week, there were two separate stabbings, one on a Metro bus, another woman stabbed in the arm on an elevator in South LA at a Metro station. This is also following what Mayor Karen Bass spoke out about last week in regard to this uptick, this surge in these acts of violence and these crimes, saying, as Metro has said, you know, the crimes and the mental illness is spilling into the Metro system. But again, people are demanding that it be made safer. So we're seeing what the mayor does with this, saying that she has a motion in place to demand a surge in public safety, having deputies and other security officers riding the bus, riding the trains, but talking to the passengers out here. There, of course, was no law enforcement on board this bus to prevent this stabbing. And we saw this happen here again just this morning, as the driver was saying he was beginning his shift and planning to just drop off passengers. And of course, he's very shaken as well, saying that he is now thinking about retiring early because of what's been happening here in the Metro system. So we're going to have more details for you coming up on KCAL News at 4 and 5.
All right, thanks a lot, Jazz. We'll see you at 4. Jurors will hear closing arguments next week in former President Donald Trump's New York trial. The defense wrapping up its case just a few hours ago. Trump did not take the stand. He has pleaded not guilty, as you probably know, to falsifying business records to hide payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Here to give us more insight on this case right now and what's ahead is criminal defense attorney Rachel Fisay. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I have to ask, are you at all surprised that Trump didn't take the stand himself, even though he kept saying over and over, like he has on many other trials in the past, that he wanted to testify?
This is not surprising at all. He has not taken the stand before. This is a criminal case. He was not going to take the stand at any time. I think that would have possibly been a disaster for him, not to mention the fact that if he were to misrepresent anything, that could lead to a perjury charge, of which for sure, the DA would have been all ears and waiting for anything that they would know to be false that would come out of his mouth.
Yeah, and Rachel, as you know, if he took the stand, he would have opened up so many other avenues that the prosecution could have gone down. So no real surprise legally that he didn't talk. But a big surprise was perhaps Michael Cohen. He turned out to be actually a pretty good witness for the defense. That was what everyone was talking about. But then all of a sudden, before resting, the defense called Robert Costello to the stand, and he might have done some serious damage to the defense, right?
Yeah, this trial has wiggled each way. You don't know who's going to win. One day it looks super good for the prosecution, and the next it looks really good for the defense. And today, the last day of witnesses being called, was a good day for the prosecution. They called a witness who the prosecution was fairly easily able to impeach. And made him look not particularly credible when he was really there to testify that Michael Cohen had told him that Trump didn't know about the payments, and the prosecution was able to really pick at that testimony and show that that was potentially just not the case.
As an attorney, Bob Costello himself is an attorney, I believe, that his demeanor in the courtroom, even though we don't have cameras inside, of course, we have many of our colleagues that are giving us this information. His demeanor inside the courtroom really turned the tide, didn't it? I mean, he was really somewhat rude to the female prosecutor that was questioning him, and that has a huge impact on the jury. In fact, we got reports today for the first time that jurors actually looked at one another and sort of like something that we really haven't seen from this jury before. Can you talk about how much little things like that really do influence a jury?
The jury is watching. The jury is watching the witnesses. The jury is watching the lawyers. The jury is, I would say, generally speaking, bored. So I think you have to go in thinking a jury is a little bored, and they've got nothing but time to observe every little tiny detail down to the buckles on people's shoes, because they are sitting there expected to make a very big decision, but that process takes time and it can be boring. So people's demeanor in the courtroom, I mean, that adds a little excitement. And if it's bad, it leaves an impression because they have nothing but time to notice everything. And as a lawyer, Mr. Costello should have known that. So speaking in those ways to the prosecutor, and it was making the judge angry. I mean, there was a lot going on there, and it made him look not credible. It can taint an entire side by having a witness that is offensive to the jury.
Closing arguments aren't going to be until after the holiday. They're going to try to get them all in next week so the jurors can see them and hear them back to back. What is that delay going to mean in this trial? And maybe more importantly, do you think Donald Trump will be quiet over these next few days? That's a long stretch before this goes to the jury.
So it's a lot of temptation to speak. So do I think he'll be quiet? No, it seems impossible. But as to what it means for the case, the prosecution had a good day. They probably would have preferred for the case to get to the jury sooner than later, given the Bob Costello situation, and that they were on a bit of a roll today. So there is some speculation that this delay could help the defense, but really what I think the judge is trying to do here is not let the jury deliberate over Memorial Day weekend, and instead bring the case to them afterwards so that they might be more willing to stay, less vacation plans. I think he's in some way just trying to have less interruption by delaying closing arguments until next week.
So we have the closing arguments that will begin on Tuesday, but then we get the jury instruction. Now, I don't want to get too technical here, but in this particular case, the instructions to the jurors on how they're supposed to consider each charge, this is key in this case because it's really very complicated, right?
It is complicated because to get to a felony charge, basically the jury has to believe there was not just the crime of falsifying the business records, but the reason that was done was to violate another law. And that's really the tricky part of this case. I think it's fairly easy to show that this business record was falsified. But to get to the next part, which is the intent part, which is why was this record falsified? And it had to be to basically influence the election or for tax purposes. And so that's the tricky part of the instruction. And right now they are still, they were hashing out these instructions with the court and what those instructions would look like next week.
You know, we haven't really talked a lot about in public the fact that there are two attorneys that are on this jury. So do you think that is going to help Donald Trump or hurt Donald Trump when they get into deliberations? Because the case is so highly technical and it's really legally hair splitting in several areas. Do you think these two attorneys are really going to sort of herd the jurors in one direction and explain these things? And what does that mean for Donald Trump?
It is so hard to say because it is so hard to take politics out of this case. I think politics are ingrained in this case and what people's preconceived notions of Donald Trump are. And I just think that this is such an unusual case that it's going to be so hard to depart from those feelings to get to the legal technicalities. And I say all that to say that it depends on what those jurors' politics are. It depends on what those attorneys' politics are and how they're going to explain that to the jury, because there is legal hair splitting and it's a close call on those. It's a complicated issue on those legalities. And so I really think those attorneys' politics matter in how they explain it to their fellow jurors.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you to predict what the jury will do because we all know how dangerous that is. But you've looked at this case very closely. Do you think the prosecution really proved its case? How would you find as a juror?
I would probably convict Donald Trump, but I think, again, this is a fairly close call, mostly because of the technicality of basically having to show two crimes to arrive at one.
Okay, and if Donald Trump is in fact found guilty, can you just walk us through the process really quickly? I think people might be under this assumption that if he's found guilty, he's going to jail right away, but it's way more subtle and complicated than that, isn't it? What would happen if they came back with a guilty verdict immediately?
Well, if they came back with a guilty verdict, obviously Donald Trump would announce appeal 5 seconds thereafter. And there's a sentencing portion. So what would then be the game is when would he be sentenced? And there's generally some time for people to prepare for sentencing. And so really, Donald Trump would likely not go to jail at that moment. He would continue on. He would continue campaigning. And there would be a date set for sentencing. And in the meantime, there would be motions that sentencing should be put off pending appeal. So all it does is just a whole new basic load of new legal issues should he be convicted.
That and the other trials that we are waiting to get underway. Rachel Fissé, thank you so much for your time and insight. Again, closing arguments are coming up on Tuesday. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, turning now to your weather with a live look outside at Malibu. Looks beautiful out there to me. A few clouds in the sky, but let's check in with meteorologist Olga Ospina for our next weather forecast. Olga, I think it looks pretty good. What do you think?
You know what? Not too bad, at least when you compare it to how we've been, right? These last few days. We're starting to see some sunshine for some areas. For others, still a little bit hazy out there. But if you head inland, places like the Inland Empire, Corona, checking in at 73 degrees. And yes, we have some sunshine there, so enjoy. But here's a look at our radar 3-hour loop showing us that cloud cover diminishing over the last several hours. And the earlier clearing has allowed for a little bit more warming this afternoon, especially as we head further inland. Places like the Antelope Valley up 12 degrees in Lancaster, up 7 in Santa Clarita, 9 in Palmdale. So overall, yes, things are looking up compared to how we were doing yesterday. And numbers into the mid-upper 70s this afternoon for the valleys and the Inland Empire, even mid-80s expected for the high desert. Mountains, you will be in the upper 60s, as will be the case for the LAOC metro area with some sunshine. Still struggling to clear out along the coastline, 66 degrees along the coast. Here's a check of wind gusts right now. So not too bad just over those deserts. We're seeing gusts in the teens for the Antelope Valley. So that's an improvement as well. So that area of low pressure starts to move off to the east. We're going to remain dry over the extended period. We have a couple of systems to our north that's still going to keep things cool. But we're not going to get any wet weather here aside from the little bit of drizzle that we've been seeing in the morning time because of that deep marine layer. And it's going to get deeper once again as we head into Thursday. But tomorrow expected to be another really nice day. Temperatures warming into the upper 70s for Santa Clarita. Chino 76, low 80s in Riverside, San Bernardino, and 60s still along the coastline for Laguna Beach and Malibu at 64 degrees. Mid 80s once again tomorrow in the Antelope Valley. And then there's that cooling trend, that slight cooling trend as we head into Thursday, but things are starting to look up as we head into early next week. A bit of a bump in temperatures for Monday, Tuesday. That, of course, is going to be your Memorial Day holiday. Valleys will be mostly in the 70s as we head into the IE, even low 80s tomorrow. There's that cool down as we head into Thursday, but then the 80s returning as we head into early next week. So just in time for the holiday. Deserts, you will be in the 80s, turning into 70s, back into the 80s by early next week. For the mountains, temperatures in the upper 60s tomorrow afternoon, and then 70s returning by Monday. Along the coast, not a whole lot of changes. Mid to upper 60s will be the story, and yes, plenty of cloud cover, but you'll see some peaks of sunshine even as we head into the afternoon hours. Ross, back to you.
Olga, what happened to our beach weekend for the holiday weekend?
I know. Monday's looking good, though. You want to take Monday off.
Alrighty, I will be off Monday.
Perfect. Enjoy. Lucky you.
I will. Thank you so much, Olga. And this has been The Rundown. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be back live at 3 right here on CBS News, Los Angeles.